it's easy for people to pass the buck and go, oh, well, it's not really mine, it's theirs, and and so it goes on. And
Sure.
that has been a real barrier over the years.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Rob Lyon, and this is a spotlight session on the Content in Business podcast. Today, I'm with Adrian McConnell, the Chief Executive of the CO Research Trust. Adrian, welcome to the show. And yeah, I guess first and foremost, tell us about the CO Research Trust.
Yeah, hi, Rob. Well, thanks for inviting me to take part in this. So the CO Research Trust, we're the UK's, I guess, principal carbon monoxide research charity. And by principal, I mean only, because we're pretty niche. So we've been going about 20 years. I've been at the helm for the last 13 years or so. And where we came from what was Corgi, the predecessor to Gas Safe Register, when Capital won the contract to run the Gas Safe Register. There was a pot of money that was set aside for doing awareness-related activities. They formed a charity to administer that money, and Corgi didn't want. Gas Safe Register didn't want the branding, the Corgi brand. So we licensed out the Corgi brand to a couple of trusted companies and organisations. That gives us our income, and since then we've invested that money and grown that money. And we've gone from there. When I joined, we did a whole range of different things. We funded awareness campaigns, educational campaigns. We supported all sorts of initiatives, a little bit of research. But what we noticed was that there are loads of organisations that are doing different awareness campaigns. I mean, you know yourself from the things that you've been involved in. It's quite a crowded field, and there's lots of people jostling for space to try and get their particular angle or message across. And we realised that there isn't really, or there wasn't anybody who was focused on getting that underpinning evidence and data. When I first joined, I'd go to a lot of meetings at the all-party parliamentary carbon monoxide group and other industry meetings, and everybody would say, well, there are probably 25 to 30 carbon monoxide fatalities per year, but we know the number's much higher. And there was always this sort of element of guesswork or guesstimation, and the numbers that we kind of rely on are extrapolated from quite small numbers. And the consensus and the sort of common argo was that, we know they're much higher. And we thought, well, do we? And how do we? And when you go and talk to policymakers and you say, we'd like you to mandate alarms in all homes or anything else that you might want to do, they say, well, how many people will it save? How much does it cost? It's very transactional. And if you don't have that evidence, then you're pushing at a closed door. So we swam for clear blue water, I suppose, and we decided that that's what we would do. We would focus solely on providing the data and evidence to underpin other people's campaigns, to improve awareness amongst healthcare professionals, and to try and make it all a bit more rigorous. So that's what we've done over the last 10 years. We make everything that, we fund freely available for anybody to use. Sure. And, it's been like wading through treacle sometimes, but we are making progress now. We are starting to see the fruits of some of that labour. And, a lot of research has quite a long tail. You agree to fund it, and it takes a year or two to get started, runs for a couple of years, they write up, and then once it's out in the world, it takes a while for it to kind of start to percolate and bubble through in other people's work. But we're starting to see that now. And about 3 years ago, we rebranded. We were the Gas Safety Trust for many years. And it always made it very confusing when you went and knocked on the door of clinicians or healthcare professionals, because they would wonder why this seemingly industry body was coming to talk about funding research. And actually, we're much more kind of healthcare focused, public health focused. So rebranding to the Carbon Monoxide Research Trust, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's much more descriptive. And we've had a much better sort of reception off the back of that.
No, that's well. Here you go. Thank you. What a detailed synopsis of what you guys do. I think it's really interesting what you said about being data driven. I mean, I've worked in the safety product, if you like, industry for a long time, from both smoke alarm sectors and carbon monoxide sectors, and the big successes that came from the smoke alarm side of my work years and years ago was based on the data of how many people would die in house fires and how the cost of a house fire to the economy, and that's would justify the big budget fire kills campaigns that were. So I think the work that you're doing is imperative to give people actual data, so that they can hopefully justify policy change campaigns on hard data. Because I've worked in this sector for a long time myself, and the frustration of those numbers of 20 to 30, we think it's worse than it is. It's so frustrating. If there could be so much more done, if the scale of the problem was as visible as I know it probably is. So that research is brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what if you've been obviously in this a long time. You've sort of touched on it, but how does is the journey to get to this point being what you expected it to be?
Not really. I mean, on a sort of from a personal perspective, this isn't where I ever imagined being. But don't we all say that? It's quite common. It's funny because I come from a family of gas engineers.
Right.
My dad was a British gas engineer. Both of his brothers were gas engineers. My brother is a gas engineer. My cousin is a gas engineer. And I was this slightly odd anomaly, really, that when I got to 18, I went and did politics and philosophy at university. Completely different. I thought, I don't want to work in the gas industry, because it felt a bit like family business, because all of my family were sort of plumbers and gasmen. And I came out of university and took a little while to find what I was going to do with myself, and ended up working for an MEP for a couple of years. And I worked for a MP in Parliament for a couple of years. And then when I came out at the 2010 general election, he lost his seat. I didn't really know what to do, and I applied for some jobs, and I ended up running the all-party parliamentary gas safety group. And here you are. So it kind of feels like you can't escape your destiny, that, it's a sort of family thing, and it was sort of almost preordained. This is where I was going to end up. So that's kind of my journey in. And I reconvened the gas safety group after the 2010 election. And through that, I met a number of the sort of industry luminaries that you and I know, Chris Bilby, Lee Greenham and others, Izzy Myers. And an opportunity came to come and manage the Gas Safety Trust as it was. And I sort of jumped at the chance, really, because it was much closer to where I wanted to be in terms of supporting a charity that had some means, and it was at a point where I was trying to decide what to do. So it was the right time, really, to get involved and help shape and steer that direction. And we've had a long journey to get to where we are. Obviously, we were fairly well established when I became involved. We've been involved for been going for 7 or 8 years, and there was a little bit of sort of, I guess, management, to convince the board that this was the right direction to go in. And once we started to fund things, it became clear this was a good idea. And we've been hosted and looked after by various trade associations and organisations. About 4 years ago, just before COVID, we went out alone and we set up on our own, sort of not hosted within a bigger organisation. And that presented challenges, because we'd sort of relied on people, other organisations, procedures and policies and infrastructure. So we sort of started from ground zero, and we've taken that time to build the team. I think it has been a long journey. It's been a really, really, really great learning experience and a developmental experience for me over the last 4 years. We've seen a lot of personnel changes, but we've reached a point now where I think we're just in the process of kind of deciding on our next 5-year strategy. And I think we're at that point now where what comes next is going to be very, very exciting. and very fully formed and thought through, and sort of standing on the shoulders of other things that are going on. And everything feels a bit more joined up than it has done in the last almost 15 years now.
No, I mean, that's great. I mean, I think, like you said, there's been sort of a few linchpins in the industry, and I think you're probably one of them now, because, there's a few people, I see people that come in and out, but there's a few hardcore few, I'd like to describe them as, that genuinely care about solving the problems in the industry. It's not they're not transitioning through career, it's not a stepping stone to another part of the career. They genuinely care about trying to fix carbon monoxide as an issue and save lives. And I suppose that kind of leads me on to my question is sort of, you've built something great, and I think it's because of that wanting to care, but don't put words in your mouth. But, what do you think has got you there? What's the key elements that have, driven you on and got you to this point?
I think a big part of it is that, carbon monoxide exposure is entirely preventable. We shouldn't really be here talking about it. I should be doing something else, really, because, if things are done right, then you can almost mitigate, and, apart from proper accidents, you can mitigate against a lot of the fatalities. One of the things that I became increasingly interested in are the low level exposure, because, it doesn't, carbon monoxide doesn't necessarily kill you, but you can be exposed for long periods of time at low levels. And it strikes me that we don't really know much about that. And a lot of the research that we've funded over the last few years has looked at what does low level carbon monoxide exposure do? What does it do to vulnerable groups? What does it do to older people? Does it have, a role in exacerbating dementia or dementias? Does it have, does it mirror the symptoms of dementia and are people being misdiagnosed? At the other end of the, what should we call it, the life cycle, you've got, unborn children, pregnant women, small children. And we know that that an unborn child experiences carbon monoxide exposure of, a factor of something like 6 or 7 times that of the mother. So lots and lots of carboxyhemoglobin hitting the developing child. And some of the little pilots that we're running were seeing carbon monoxide causes significant, congenital heart defects, thickening of the heart wall and other things. So we're looking at those things, and in a way, that's the thing that's kind of got the bit between my teeth, is that we haven't really got to an understanding. And this is an area with lots and lots of room for research. And, whilst we might see a transition in the way that we heat and cook in our homes, the electrification of all that, and maybe the use of, hydrogen, or, maybe in the homes. I mean, there's lots of arguments about that, which probably we don't want to get into here now. But, I think those low levels will remain in some way, shape or form. And we need to understand that, really, because it's not just about, most people think, well, carbon monoxide, it poisons you, it causes hypoxia. So, it reduces the amount of oxygen in the blood. But what you're seeing is lots and lots of things. It changes the way that the cell behaves. And I can't pretend to sort of understand this completely. I'm not a scientist or a biologist. I often feel that I go into these things and, I'm in this room full of smart people and I'm the dumbest person in the room, but my job is to kind of corral them or herd them in one way. But that's been a wonderful experience to be able to learn that. So, I always feel like I'm learning something new. I'm curious about the science. And I'm slowly getting to grips. He says 15 years in, but it's very, very complex, and you have to have all that prior knowledge. But I think the other thing as well is, as you say, there are those people who've been around for a long time who understand how we've got this far and have jumped over those, jumped through those hoops and over those hurdles to get to where we are. People like I mentioned, like Izzy, Scott Darragh, Chris Bilby was a big influence and a big role model in this. Baroness Finlay, our chair, she's been very, very consistent in all this. So there's been a community of people, and it's entirely natural that people come and they go and they pass through. But I think there is a group of people who've come and stayed, and people like Stephanie Trotter as well, who, who has been, a critical friend to the industry, certainly been a critical friend to me, and sort of kept us all in line. And I think she's been doing this for 30 years. And understandably, like me, she feels this is something that is resolvable, but it still hasn't been. And there is that sense of frustration. And, that's why we keep going. And, I think I'm probably, made a little Stockholm syndrome. I'm here now and I don't know that anyone else would have me.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I suppose. So what do you, I can probably predict the answer because, when things are based on research, there's always an end goal of fixing the thing. But what is the vision and the dream for the trust, you think, or, like the ultimate goal?
Yeah. I think the big one is zero deaths. That's the end goal. And I think that is achievable apart from those incidents and accidents that happen outside of human control. And there'll always be something that could go wrong that is outside of our purview or our control. But I think understanding the low levels, understanding what effect they might have on the unborn child's development in terms of lifelong learning, educational outcomes, health outcomes. I think understanding the effects of those low levels in terms of comorbidities. Do they exacerbate or create other conditions? So if you have an underlying heart condition, does carbon monoxide exposure make you more likely to have a heart attack or some other kind of, incident that may make you ill or kill you? And just, I think quantifying how many people are being exposed, Chris Bilby used to talk about the iceberg, and he used to talk about the fatalities at the apex, and then there are the injuries. So the people who go to hospital and are admitted, and then there are people who go to the hospital, are treated and sent home, and then underneath that, all the ones that we don't know about below the water, the people who are exposed but they don't realise it, or they're exposed, realise it but don't know anything about it. And that's the bit that we need to understand, really, what is underneath the water. And then you're going to get to the true cost and impact of this. And that's when I think people will start to listen. Once the numbers are compelling enough that, people go, gosh, we actually do need to do something about this, because it's not, a guesstimate of 20 or 30 people. It's big numbers. That's when policymakers will listen.
And what do you sort of see as the biggest challenge getting to that vision? Obviously we've been in it a long time. You're making great waves. What's the biggest challenge of realizing that?
I think despite being around for as long as I have, and others around me have been around much longer, we're still at a relatively early stage. We want to remove the risk. There's also the issue of, people need to be able to prove that they've been poisoned. So, you have to test. I know that Stephanie often says, the Lord Kelvin said, to test is to know. And so getting engineers to test for CO to prove that an appliance is spilling carbon monoxide, or somebody is being poisoned, knowing the source and knowing how they've been poisoned for how long. All that stuff is great in terms of treatment, in terms of getting help and support to recover from that. But there's just so much to do, really. We're limited in the way that we diagnose, because carboxyhemoglobin, if you're poisoned, it takes you 40 minutes to get tested, to go to the doctors to get tested. By then the carbon monoxide is gone, so you have a lower reading, so they might not realise you've been poisoned and send you back home. So, we're sort of trying to count with a sort of broken abacus, and until you get the right equipment to count, to actually spot all of them and capture all the incidents, you're not really going to get to the true number. So we have a long way to go. And if you accept that people are being poisoned, it was still pretty early stages in terms of how we treat carbon monoxide. So, we whenever I talk to people outside of work about what I do, I always feel, well, what we're doing is rather niche and, pretty specialist, and we're a small world. But actually, when you do start to talk it through like this, you think, well, actually, it touches on so many areas, and it has this interface. If you look at the government departments that have a little bit of responsibility for it, that's one of the challenges, that it doesn't really fall in the lap of any one organisation or any one government department. So it's easy for people to pass the buck and go, oh, well, it's not really mine, it's theirs, and and so it goes on, and
Sure.
that has been a real barrier over the years.
I suppose one thing I always find interesting is, obviously, I know a lot about yourselves. I know lots about the industry. There's various different campaigns and the like. How do you sort of market the trust so that people know about you and the work that you're doing, and maybe support you on the journey?
Yeah. So I'm very, very lucky to be supported by a team of women who all come from a communications and marketing background, and they absolutely run the show in that regard, really, and I'm very glad that they do, because it's not my background at all. But our website is the centre of everything that we do.
Sure.
This has sort of shop window. We rebranded and we redeveloped our website, and we've started an events program which not only promotes the work that we do and the research that we fund, but also highlights these areas that carbon monoxide touches upon, and we try and reach other audiences beyond the converted, if you like. There are the usual suspects who will turn out to every event, and we know who they are, and there's about 40 or 50 of us, and sometimes you can go to these events and it feels like a really bad family wedding. There's, there he is over there, and all the rest of it. But
sure,
we try and hold these lectures online, which we do monthly over the winter. We hold round tables and workshops where we try and look at a different issue. It might be fuel poverty, it might be the effect on the brain, it might be something to do with older people. And what we then do is we can bring in a wider audience. And that's kind of critical, really, because when you're talking to other people, you almost need to piggyback on a bigger issue so that they realise this is important,
Sure.
And you get that extra traction. And also, you get that associative benefit. Quite often you partner with people who are seen as credible in that area, so you get a little bit of their sheen and their credibility.
Yeah, sure.
And people take you seriously. And yourself, these things are an uphill struggle. People don't think about their boiler going wrong until it goes wrong. It's just a white box in the corner. So getting people to think about that is difficult. And it's the same thing with carbon monoxide, really. People don't want to think about things going wrong, do they?
No, absolutely. I mean, as far as I've been critical historically of, the industry has been quite good at communicating to the industry about the problem and not talking to that wider audience. And I think I see that as the biggest challenge which I've worked so hard for, is to make sure that we're, even without the research, we can give the basic advice to people to avoid those incidents, as you said, rather than the low level piece. I think is critical. It's something I'm definitely going to be looking at this year, to make sure we cover those low level pieces. Indoor air quality, full stop, as an issue, is something that needs to be addressed. But yeah, I kind of feel like I assume everyone knows about carbon monoxide because I know about it so much.
Yeah,
and I'm always stunned at just how few people still have heard of it. They know they've got boilers, and they probably know that they were given a carbon monoxide alarm by the gas engine at the time. No idea what it is or what it does. The biggest, I set up a long time ago, I did a whole full suite of videos purely about understanding the sounds of your carbon monoxide alarm.
Okay.
And to date, that they still have the highest views of anything I've ever produced. Because people understand, what is that white box and why is it beeping at me?
Yeah.
And so it just shows there is so much work still to do. Some people have that alarm in their home, but understand all the other precautions that could be taken to keep themselves safe. So I think we've got a long journey ahead, but the research that you're doing is critical to that. Yeah,
so it's important sort of part of it, and hopefully it's a bit more. We are more joined up than we were. I think there's still probably a space for, better organisation and coordination. But quite how you achieve that with hardly any funding for that, I don't know. But,
Yes.
I think that's something that can always be refined and improved to make sure you create this big tent that everybody wants to take part in.
I think that would be one of the holy grails in terms of the vision is you've really got complete ownership of the research part, which I think is critical. No one has that role from a communications perspective, really. There's still lots of, as you stated at the beginning, lots of individuals, all with the best intentions, but the power would be so much greater if they were one united force, if you like. So maybe that's part of the vision, and maybe the research can help us get there.
And you think of some of the big players that are involved, that they've got not only resources, but they've got big teams of communications experts and things. So if you could have someone in the middle of that spider's web, to sort of direct and really get the message out through those channels, because I think, we remain quite a quiet voice in and amongst the noise that some of those big companies make, and we could do more. And I think, having met quite a few of the sort of, in a lot of those big gas companies, we won't name them, but, a lot of those directors, they're of an age, or experience where they know a lot about carbon monoxide because maybe they've come up through the tools or something, and they do take it seriously. But it often seems that once you get a bit further down the food chain, if you like, it's really, really hard to get people to prioritise this particular safety issue over some of the environmental issues or some of the other things that they want to talk about. So it kind of gets crowded out.
Absolutely.
So that's my perception anyway.
No, I agree. There's lots we could do. I suppose this is my closing question. And I think it's be very interesting from your perspective if, with all the experience, everything you've spoken about, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to an individual working in a position like yours from maybe another charity, a trust, something like that?
Collaborate. I mean, it's, you can't work in a silo. You have to find ways to come together and make the most of the resource you have, share, be open. I think that is the only way that you make progress. I think my experience over the last 15 years is when we've moved the most slowly is when there's been an element of competition, when people have been competing, and this is something I think about a lot. I think that, when people are, are really, really open about the information that they have, share the resource they have, I think, we get so much more done. And that is the complete ethos behind what we do, is we're lucky to have a reasonable pot of money that we can use for research. And there's no point in spending that money and then putting it on a shelf and no one being able to access it. You've got to go out there and make people aware that you've got it and encourage them to use it and help them think of ways to use it and them know that they can come here. Because, we try and do that, but we need a two-way dialogue. We need people to tell us this is a gap. This is something that we've spotted. You see these issues emerge, whether it's we start having incidents. There was a period where we saw an upswing in the number of incidents and people taking barbecues into tents and things like that. There was another period where we had a sort of spate of incidents of carbon monoxide exposure on recreational boats. And it's reacting to that and saying, okay, let's find out why that's happening. But you can only either pick it up through the press or have this dialogue with the people who know and who are working in it. And, and I think that's the key really. And the all-party parliamentary carbon monoxide group has done a lot of good work to sort of facilitate that. I think the forum has been great. We try and use our conference, which, it takes place on the 18th and 19th of June in Edgbaston in Birmingham. We try and use that as a sort of centerpiece of our year, really, to try and get everyone together, because there aren't many, we used to always schlep up to London and meet all these all-party group meetings. But now it's all, remote or it's hybrid. So very rarely do you get everybody in the room. So we hold our conference. We purposely don't have it hybrid because we all want people in the room. Because whilst what goes up on the stage behind the podium and on the screen and in the workshops is important, the really, really important bit is standing, having the lukewarm coffee and a biscuit and talking to your colleagues and reflecting on what's gone on in the room. And you just can't do that with Zoom, because you and I will finish this, we'll switch this off and we'll go our separate ways. But if we were doing this in a studio together or in Parliament, we'd walk back to the tube. We might go and get a coffee or a beer or something, and that is really key. And I think that's collaboration, relationships, working together,
No, fabulous. No, we'll link to the CEO Research Trust website, all your social profiles, so people can find out about that event, especially. Yeah. Again, there'll be some people listening today, hopefully, that are from that outer circle that aren't aware of the issues, and actually it's something that really resonates, and they'd definitely like to be involved. So no, thank you very, very much. It's been really interesting. We've spoken to lots of business owners, marketing directors. I really wanted to speak to someone from a trust or a charitable background, because your goals aren't necessarily pounds and pence. It's about making a material change in the world. I think that's a really important perspective to shine the light on. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for everyone who is watching or listening to the Content in Business podcast. Please make sure you like, rate and share. Follow this podcast. And until next time, see you soon.